The Olympics, now more than a century old, remains the greatest show on earth. Its host cities, like Rio de Janeiro, the very grandest of stages. But it is in singular moments that the memory of the Olympics most effectively endures. As the Games come to Rio, the New York Times invites you to travel back in time to experience a few of those Olympic memories on some of those grand stages. Let's start at the beginning by visiting the first modern Games in Athens. The year is 1896. The Panathenaic Stadium. A display of manly virtue was Baron de Coubertin's vision for his newly revived Olympics, and the gentlemen amateur athletes of the West came to the stadium to make that vision real. Constructed in the 4th century BC and newly clad in white marble, the stadium was the centrepiece of the first modern Games. Organised sport was still in its infancy in 1896, and rules and practices varied enormously. In the sprints, for example, American runners started in a crouch position, while the less experienced Greeks stood erect. The rules for wrestling were different in America, Britain and continental Europe, and had to be drawn up on the spot. Hermann Weingartner, seen here on the rings, won gold in the horizontal bar and silver in the rings and pommel horse. 1932, Los Angeles, the Coliseum. It was the depth of the Depression, but the Olympics met Hollywood in the California sun, and Babe Didrikson was the undisputed star. She was a working-class, wisecracking Texan who was simply an unbelievable all-round athlete. You're surrounded by her moments of triumph. Los Angeles was only the second Olympics that had permitted women's track and field events. While sports writers like Grant and Rice championed her, many observers of the era found Didrikson's physique and intensity worryingly masculine. But to athletes like Jackie Joyner-Kersee, the heptathlete and 3-time Olympic gold medalist, Babe's trailblazing was invaluable.
Imagine for a woman to do the things that she was able to do during those times, how thick your skin needed to be great in track and field, but then also to go and be a great golfer, and that motivated me. I am always in debt and very grateful for the women who came before me.
1968, Mexico City, the Olympic Stadium.
He came roaring up the runway and just sort of rose in the air, and it seemed to me continued rising. And I remember seeing the whites of his eyes wide open, and I clicked the camera.
Tony Duffy captured Bob Beeman's astonishment as he obliterated the long jump world record by more than 2 feet. Beeman remembers the day he set a world record that would last for a generation.
I made this approach. As my horizontal and my vertical met, I was up over 6 feet.
There's a judge sitting there, and Beeman is actually over her head. His mouth was sort of in a, almost surprised look.
I felt like Superman. I felt like I could just fly.
They moved the new electronic measuring device along till it fell off the end of the little rail. It took 45 minutes to measure the jump.
The sun was out when I jumped, and suddenly the stadium turned dark like it was night. And then suddenly it poured, it rained. It was like somebody was watching over me to make sure that I made my jump before the rain.
2008, Beijing, the Bird's Nest. You are standing on the track at Beijing's Olympic Stadium for the final of the men's 100 metres. It was the biggest Olympic stadium ever constructed, an unprecedented stage for the track and field events. And one athlete rose to the moment like no other. Usain Bolt took the world's breath away when he won the race in a world record 9.69 seconds. Next to Bolt, in lane 5, was Richard Thompson of Trinidad and Tobago, who remembers his own personal triumph of finishing second as the fastest man on earth Usain Bolt.
I had the best start that I'd ever gotten in my life. Led the race to 30 to 40 meters, and as we gradually come up, Usain Bolt makes this huge transition between 40 and 50 meters. It was probably the craziest thing I'd ever experienced. It sort of was like what I call the full bus effect. You know, he passed me like a full bus. I knew Bolt was gone. I knew I was a silver medalist. I put my hand in the air because to me, it was a personal victory.
What Olympic memories will Rio stage? A city of sharp contrasts and emotional intensity. Simone Romero, the New York Times bureau chief in Rio, takes the pulse of the city, its people, and its games.
Of all the cities to host the Olympics, Rio's got to rank among the most thrilling. Glimpses of the city's magnificence and some of the pageantry of the games come into focus. You're standing in the middle of the Estadio Olímpico, home to the track and field events, where Usain Bolt will try once again to thrill the crowd. Look around and it's easy to see why Rio was once the seat of the Empire of Brazil. Soaring granite peaks, sun-kissed beaches, the teeming streets around its port, and boulevards lined with Belle Epoque buildings. Of course, Rio also features the inequality that stains Brazil's unruly democracy. Dissent flourishes here too. As Brazil faces bribery scandals and political upheaval, not everyone really agrees that hosting the Games is a good idea. Authorities have spent billions ripping apart and rebuilding swaths of the city in their huge overhaul. Some projects won't be done until almost the last minute, just before the flame is lit. All of Rio's sharp contrasts, its vibrancy and disarray and warmth in receiving visitors, will be on display.